October 2022. A mother in Price, Utah, watches footage from a newly installed bedroom camera. The screen shows her 31-year-old disabled daughter's room at 2:47 a.m. What she witnesses in the next 3 minutes will shatter her world forever. Rewind to 2014. A seemingly caring stepfather enters their lives. For 8 years, no one questions why Ashley's seizures are getting worse, why she's losing weight, or why she seems increasingly terrified at night. No one realizes that behind closed doors, a predator is methodically exploiting the perfect victim, a young woman trapped in her own body, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to cry for help. As investigators dig deeper, they uncover a 20-year trail of similar victims across 3 states, women and girls whose voices were silenced, warnings ignored, red flags dismissed, until a single nanny cam footage exposed not just a predator, but an entire system that failed to protect those who needed protection most. This is the story that would spark a revolution in disability rights. This is the case that would change laws. This is the Ashley Vigil story. A warning to our viewers: what you're about to watch is a true crime story involving serious crimes against a disabled person. Some viewers may find the content highly disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to Cold Case Chronicles. Today's case will shake you to your core. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. And now we begin. Price, Utah. Population 8,715. A small mining town where generations of families know each other by name, where neighbors still bring casseroles during hard times, and where secrets aren't meant to stay buried for long. Here, in a modest home on a quiet street, Paula Vigil had created a sanctuary, a space meticulously designed around her daughter Ashley's needs. Every room, every corner, every piece of medical equipment carefully placed to make life easier for a young woman who couldn't tea, move, or speak for herself. For 17 years, this home had been their fortress. Paula had devoted every waking moment to giving Ashley the best life possible, defying doctors who said her daughter wouldn't live past 11. But in October 2022, the Tenna fortress would crumble, and it would begin with something as simple as a nanny cam. The camera was meant to monitor Ashley's worsening seizures, a medical tool to help doctors understand why, after so many years of stability, her condition was suddenly deteriorating. Instead, its footage would expose a darkness that had been hiding in plain sight, a darkness that would lead investigators down a twisted path spanning 3 states, 2 decades, and multiple victims. What you about to witness isn't just the story of one family's tragedy. It's a haunting revelation of how our justice system repeatedly fails those who need its protection most. This is a story about innocence betrayed, justice delayed, and the fight to ensure that Ashley Vigil's name becomes synonymous with change. Please be advised, this story contains details of crimes against a disabled person that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Ashley Vigil was born into a world that doctors said wouldn't be hers for long. In her earliest years, as other children were taking their first steps, Ashley's mother Paula noticed something different about her daughter's development. The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt: Rett syndrome, a rare genetic disorder that would gradually rob Ashley of the ability to walk, to speak, to control her own movements. The doctors were blunt. Prepare yourself, they told Paula. She likely won't see her 11th birthday. But they didn't know it's Ashley, and they certainly didn't know her mother. In their Price, Utah home, Paula created what she called Ashley's tiny, safe bubble. Every morning began with gentle care, careful feeding, medication management, and physical therapy. Ashley couldn't speak with words, but those who knew her best understood her language. A slight movement of her eyes could mean yes. A particular expression could signal discomfort. In her mother's words, Ashley was trapped in her tiny body, but her spirit remained unbound. Against all medical predictions, Ashley not only survived, but thrived in her own way. She developed a special love for being read to, particularly by her grandmother. Though weighing only 48 pounds as an adult, her presence in the household was immense. She became the center of a world built entirely around her needs, her comfort, her safety. Paula often said that together they could beat anything. Through countless seizures, through medical emergencies, through sleepless nights, mother and daughter formed a bond that seemed unbreakable. Their home became more than just a house. It was a fortress of care, a sanctuary where Ashley could be safe, understood, and deeply loved. But in 2014, that sanctuary would be breached. The arrival of a new presence in their home would begin a chain of events that would eventually shatter their carefully constructed world, a world that Paula had spent 31 years building, protecting, and perfecting for her daughter. 2014 marked a turning point in the Vigil household. Brian Kenneth Urban, a 52-year-old medical equipment supplier, entered their lives with what seemed like perfect timing. For Paula, exhausted from years of being her daughter's sole caretaker, his presence offered hope. "I told him my life is doctor's appointments and surgeries," Paula would later recall. It was a warning and a test of sorts, a way of saying this was an ordinary household. Urban didn't flinch. Instead, he seemed to understand, to accept, to want to help. But as Urban settled into their lives, subtle changes began to surface. Ashley's health, which had been relatively stable despite her condition, started showing concerning signs. Her seizures, once manageable, became more frequent. Her weight, always delicate, began to drop. The changes were almost imperceptible at first. A new nervousness in Ashley's demeanor, unexplained distress at night, small shifts in routine that seemed innocent enough in isolation. Paula, consumed with the increasing medical challenges, attributed these changes to her daughter's progressing condition. What no one knew then was that Urban carried secrets, dark ones, secrets that stretched back through 2 decades and across 3 states. Stories that would later emerge from Montana and Wyoming. Stories that, had they been heard sooner, might have changed everything. "Together, we could beat anything," Paula had always said about her life with Ashley. But now, unknowingly, she had invited something into their sanctuary that no amount of medical expertise or maternal devotion could protect against. By late 2022, Ashley's condition had deteriorated significantly. Her seizures had become increasingly severe, and her weight had dropped dramatically. At just 48 pounds, every ounce lost was cause for alarm. Medical professionals were puzzled by this sudden decline in a patient who had defied odds for so long. Following her doctor's recommendation, Paula installed a nanny camera in Ashley's bedroom. The purpose was simple: to monitor the nighttime seizures, to understand their patterns, to help the medical team adjust Ashley's care. It was a decision that would unveil something far more sinister than any medical condition. On that October night, as Paula reviewed the footage, her world collapsed. The camera had captured what no mother should ever have to witness. Her husband, the man she had trusted with her daughter's care, was methodically violating Ashley's sanctuary. The footage showed Urban entering the room, removing Ashley's clothing, assaulting her, then carefully redressing her, leaving no trace of his crimes. Paula's maternal instincts, which had kept Ashley alive against all odds for 31 years, now turned to pure protective rage. She immediately contacted law enforcement, her hands shaking but her voice steady, and reported what she had discovered. Within hours, the Price Police Department launched their investigation. The response was swift. Police body camera footage from October 2022 shows Urban's arrest, a moment that would mark the beginning of the end of his freedom. But for investigators, this was just the start. What began as a singular, horrific discovery would soon unravel into something far more extensive. When confronted with the evidence, Urban's response was as calculated as his crimes. He would later attempt to blame his actions on elevated testosterone levels and medication, claiming he was in a dreamlike state where reality felt like a dream. But the methodical nature of his actions captured on camera, told a different story. She spent her life trapped in her little, tiny body, where she could be safe in her home. Paula would later testify, her voice breaking. Then he took even that, and eventually he took her life. The safe bubble that Paula had spent decades creating for Ashley had been shattered in the most unimaginable way. As prosecutors built their case against Brian Urban, the charges mounted. 5 felony counts, including rape and forcible sexual abuse, painted a picture of calculated predation. But as investigators dug deeper, they discovered that Ashley's tragedy was not an isolated incident. It was merely the latest chapter in a decades-long pattern of abuse. The investigation led detectives across state lines to Montana, where another family had been harboring their own horrific memories of Urban. Paula S., who had married him in the spring of 1996, came forward with a story that would send chills down investigators' spines. Her daughters, Kirsten and Elisa, had carried their own dark secrets about Urban for years. "He played all 3 of us," Kirsten would later reveal. "The impression I had was if it was happening to me, it wasn't happening to her. He'd be like, 'Well, I'll hurt your mom if you say anything.'" It was a pattern of manipulation that Urban had perfected over decades. In Wyoming, police records showed Urban had been arrested for strangulation. He received just 3 years probation. More disturbingly, both Kirsten and Elisa had reported their abuse to Rock Springs police, Kirsten in 2014, Elisa in 2017. The cases were investigated and sent to prosecutors, who declined to pursue charges. The timeline was devastating in its implications. In early 2014, Urban left Paula S. and her family. That same year, he met Paula Vigil and Ashley in Utah, while Ashley's mother saw hope in a man who claimed to understand their challenges. Urban was actually selecting his next victim, perhaps his most vulnerable yet. But the case faced an unexpected hurdle. Despite Ashley's severe disabilities, her legal status as an adult meant different sentencing guidelines would apply. There was no mandatory minimum sentence, even for crimes of this magnitude against someone who was effectively as helpless as a child. Attorney Nathaniel Woodward would later explain the cruel irony. "When a citizen of our state is raped and their attacker found guilty, the severity of the punishment will be determined by whether the victim was an adult or a minor. However, no substantive consideration is given to an adult victim's mental capacity. If things had been handled properly, this would have never happened to Ashley and her family," Kirsten would later say, her voice heavy with the weight of what could have been. The system had failed, not once, not twice, but repeatedly, and Ashley had paid the ultimate price. As the legal system slowly turned its wheels toward justice, Ashley's health continued to decline. The trauma inflicted upon her fragile body had taken an irreversible toll. Her seizures grew more frequent, more severe. Her already slight frame grew smaller still. On March 16, 2024, in a moment of tragic poetry, Ashley passed away in her grandmother's arms while being read to one of the simple pleasures that had brought light to her challenging life. She was just 31 years old. Her mother, Paula, who had fought so hard to keep her alive against all odds, was now left to fight for her justice. News of Ashley's death galvanized the community. On the day of Urban's sentencing, dozens of strangers gathered outside the West Jordan 3rd District Court. They came to be Ashley's voice, to ensure that even in death, she would not be silenced. Her empty wheelchair sat among them, a powerful symbol of the void left behind. In court, Urban attempted to deflect responsibility with a calculated statement. "My testosterone levels were elevated to be extremely high in a short amount of time," he claimed, his voice steady. "I was in a dreamlike state where reality felt like a dream." The packed courtroom sat in disgusted silence as he tried to diminish the weight of his calculated predation. But Judge Stephen Nelson saw through the excuses. In a landmark decision, he ordered Urban's 5 felony convictions to be served consecutively, 5 years to life for each of the 2 rape convictions. and 1 to 15 years for each count of forcible sexual abuse. Urban would face the maximum punishment the law allowed. I thought I was angry before, Paula said after the sentencing, her voice raw with emotion. But now that she's died, I'm so angry now. The mother, who had once told Urban her life was all about Dr. S. appointments and surgeries, was now dedicating that life to ensuring her daughter S. death would not be in vain. Ashley Vigil's story could have ended in that courtroom. Instead, it sparked a movement. In the wake of her death, 3 Utah lawmakers stepped forward, instead committed to ensuring that no other vulnerable adult would fall through the same cracks in the justice system. The push for Ashley's Law began with a simple but powerful premise. A person's legal status as an adult should not diminish their protections when they real as vulnerable as a child. Attorney Nathaniel Woodward, who helped draft the legislation, put it plainly, we must consider an adult victim's mental capacity when determining sentencing for these heinous crimes. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Yet Urban's sentencing. Ashley's empty wheelchair sat among a sea of supporters who had never met her but felt compelled to become her voice. They chanted in unison, "Who are we here for? Ashley." Their message echoed through the courthouse halls, demanding change. From Montana, the family that had tried to sound the alarm about Urban years before joined the fight. They drove hundreds of miles to stand with Paula Vigil, to testify to the pattern of abuse that the system had failed to stop. Their presence sent a powerful message. This wasn't just about changing Utah's laws. It was about fixing a broken system across state lines. The ripple effects of Ashley's case began touching other aspects of disability rights. Hospitals nationwide started reviewing their security protocols for vulnerable patients. Background checks for medical equipment suppliers faced greater scrutiny. The tiny safe bubble that Paula had created for Ashley was expanding to protect others. Advocates continued to rally under Ashley's name, pushing for stronger protections for disabled adults across America. Her story has become a rallying cry for change, proving that even those who cannot speak can still be heard, if only we listen. In her 31 years of life, Ashley Vigil never spoke a word. Yet in death, her story echoes across courtrooms, legislative halls, and communities throughout America. Her case exposed not just one predator, but an entire system that failed to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Paula Vigil's words haunt us still. She spent her life trapped in her little tiny body, where she could be safe in her home. Then he took even that, and eventually he took her life. But through Ashley's Law, her mother's fight ensures that Ashley's life continues to protect others. The fight for justice doesn't end here.